Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
In my association with Project Group, they definitely withheld information.
The whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Oh, look at that. The start. The starting's already messed it up. All right. Tonight, this is Total Disclosure Live, a special presentation. We're here with Teresa Tyndale. She's making her formal return to the show, if you will. And we'll be doing the lives again weekly. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the return of the Messiah. We broke a story a while back about 3 red heifers that were shipped from Texas to Israel. And Teresa talked to us about a prophecy of the third temple of Jerusalem. Now, could the people of Israel, Jerusalem specifically, be preparing for the return of a Messiah? And could that Messiah be extraterrestrial in nature? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. All that and more with expert in pre-industrial UFO sightings and religious scholar Teresa Tyndale, former state director and activist in the UFO field. How are we doing, Teresa?
Hey, it's great to see you again, Ty.
I hope I hit all the keywords.
You did. That was great.
Right.
Yeah, I love that intro.
Yeah. It's good to have you back. We're not going to waste too much time, lollygagging, because there is a lot to get to. And you and I have been talking behind the scenes about for weeks. I mean, ever since we talked about the 3 red heifers being sent to Israel from Texas, you had brought it up to me and kind of put it on my radar. And ever since then, the pieces kind of just slowly but surely started to fit into place. So so you and I are having these conversations behind the scenes and we're just like, what is going on? And so maybe you could give us a little bit of insight on what the significance. So, I mean, what is the connection between the red heifers, the third temple, and the return of some sort of messianic, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Masonic figure? And could that figure be extraterrestrial? Has the name just changed over the centuries?
Well, yeah. So, if we look at things from a basically an ancient alien perspective, is what we're doing now. It all starts to make sense, and you're able to really reconcile science with religion. And so these red heifers have to be sacrificed and cremated, and their ashes have to be used to purify anybody who is going to potentially work to build the third temple. Now, the significance of the temple is that it was Solomon's temple. King Solomon was the first one to build the temple, and it was literally it's the holiest site now for both the Jews and the Muslims. But at the time, it was literally built to be God's dwelling place on earth. And so if God is not of this earth, which by definition is extraterrestrial, we're talking about a place where they would go to meet with this other worldly entity. And it had to be so perfect. I mean, everything has to be, everything is very specific. The architecture, people have to be purified before they can even walk on the site to build the new temple. And that's what these red heifers are for. They have to sacrifice them and use their ashes to purify anybody who's going to be on that site. And so inside of the temple, there was the holiest of holies. And that was the room behind the curtain where God, our other, our interdimensional, otherworldly God entity would dwell behind this curtain. I mean, we're not talking about a non-corporeal spirit. We're talking about a physical entity that needed its own space to be. And so the temple's been destroyed a couple of times. It was first sacked by I think it was the Babylonians in like 586 BC. And then it was reconstructed, and it was there during the time of Jesus. And there's a red heifer. So the red heifers have to be perfect. I mean, this is very this
I
has
wanted to
been
bring it up
for
because,
thousands of years.
yeah, you had mentioned that not only, so I have it, so not only do the priests and the land have to be purified, but even the tools used have to be coated or rubbed in the ashes of the heifers. And the heifer, so it's basically what it says is to sacrifice a red heifer without defect or blemish, and that has never been under a yoke. And that's from the Old Testament, book of Numbers 19. Now, what does that mean? And is that why they got 3? Because they're looking for one with no blemish and whatever that means, under the yoke. I'm not.
Yeah, so one that's never been worked, and they have to be a certain age. So one that's, when you put a yoke on them to work them and they're plowing a field, one that has never been yoked before, one that's never been worked, they have to be of a certain age. So they have to be 3 or under. And when they say perfect, that means they have to be perfectly red from nose to tail without a single white hair. They have to have every single, and they inspect them. They go and they inspect them. So they're very rare.
Clearly, this guy's a magnifying glass.
Yes. Yeah. See, I mean, they inspect them. And this is ancient. I mean, this is like 3,000-year-old prophecy, and it's also 3,000-year-old scripture, of sacrificing these perfect red heifers. But they're so rare that you don't even really get the opportunity to have them. So the first one that was actually born in the early 1900s, there was a female, there was one born there, and her name was Melody. And that got everybody excited because they thought, oh, she's ushering in the end times, because that's really where we're going with this. So once they sacrifice these red heifers, then they plan to build the third temple. The problem is there's a structure already there. The Dome of the Rock is there, and that's the Muslim mosque, and that's also one of their holiest sites, because that's where Muhammad was taken up by God. And there you see it there. It's got the gold dome. I've always been interested in this gold symbology, this gold disc symbology, and it's got the gold dome there. So the big fight in the Middle East has always been that the Muslims built their mosque over the ancient site that was previously the Jewish holy site. And actually the Romans even had a pagan place there for a while. So I mean we're literally talking about a physical place on earth where an extraterrestrial being dwells. Like that's the whole point of this. The whole point of the structure. And there's been some paranormal activity there. So when Jesus, the Christians would say that when Jesus was crucified, there was an earthquake and the curtain between the holiest of holy rooms, split. And the Muslims say that that's where Muhammad ascended up to heaven. So we're talking about one of the most ancient spots on earth with a lot of paranormal activity. And it continues even today. I mean, even in the past, I think it was 11 years ago, somebody got footage of a light UFO, and it descended down over the
I'm gonna
dome.
show you. I'm gonna show that clip right now. There's multiple angles, all in the one video, and this is taking place right. I mean, if you don't scream to yourself divine after watching something like this, I mean, there's no helping you.
זה יורד למטה.
אתה מצלם? אתה רואה?
אני רואה, מה זה?
תגיד, שתינו יותר מדי? לא, כולנו רואים את זה.
מה זה?
שיו!
יואו! מה זה?
אמא?
מה זה, ראית? יואו בנברות. ראית את זה?
תראה, יש שם עוד.
הנה, תראי שמה. מה זה?
אמא, לדור, אמא.
יש קבוצה שלמה שם, תראה.
So you can hear all of them exclaim at roughly the same time. The videos are synced. I tried to sync them as best I could, but I mean, that's 4 different angles of the same UFO. And I know I've heard from people, all around the UFO community that those videos in particular have been debunked, but I feel like every UFO sighting video, has been claimed to be debunked as well. So with this one, I am torn because there's so many angles. I'm able to do something like that where I can take 4 different angles and basically sync them up to time. I mean, it's hard to do if you're hoaxing, to do something like of that nature. So clearly this part of the world, I mean, they've been at war inevitably since the creation of Israel, right? And the state of what do they call themselves? Is it a nation state?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't know about that. But it seems
Israel has always had to defend itself from inception. They've had almost, if not every surrounding nation, literally invade at some point. Could this be because it's the center of humanity, and are they being prepared in a way that maybe others aren't?
Well, that's, so that's kind of what I'm starting to think is it possible that this is the last known extraterrestrial base on Earth? And, the oldest religions and the oldest societies, they know that. Oh, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. Thank you. Yeah, it's totally popping off. So, is it possible that this is the oldest extraterrestrial site on the earth? The Jewish people know it, and then later on, the Muslims became aware of it, because literally that's where Muhammad was. I mean, we could just say it, abducted. Um, and then, so then what happens after they build the temple? So the whole point of building the temple is to bring back the Messiah. Now, who is the Messiah? Like, who is this? Where does this entity come from?
Right.
This entity is not on Earth. So by very nature, it's an extraterrestrial entity. Is it interdimensional? Um, uh, you know, where is this entity coming from? And so, but they're willing to basically start a holy war over it. I mean, because once they're going to have to knock down the Dome of the Rock to build the third temple, and this really could start World War III. And are we really talking about people being willing to start World War III to bring the aliens back? Basically, is that what we're talking about here?
Well, what I have, my question is, if Israel is, if Jerusalem and Israel, and they arguably have the the most intelligence community in the world, and they're allied with the places like the United States. How much do other governments or other governing bodies, how much are they clued in on this? Because I'd be hard pressed to say that the capital, right, the DC and Washington, maybe even the Vatican, right, especially if things like the Ark of the Covenant are in fact in Jerusalem, under the temple. I it's not proven, it's a theory, but what's your take on that? I'd arguably say that the Vatican, the United States, and maybe the British Ministry of Defense, and then just Israel. They are the controllers of the world. They are the people pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Well, so that's one of the big issues too, is that it's been said that the first temple had the 10 commandments and it had the Ark of the Covenant. Now, I personally think the Ark of the Covenant was the craft that brought God to the temple. And I think that and I know that that's a depiction of the Ark of the Covenant, and that's how it's been portrayed. But if you read the account of Ezekiel from the Bible, he's describing a flying craft. So it's possible that all of these ancient artifacts were put under the temple when it was attacked. And then, so when the Muslims built the Dome of the Rock over that area, it's possible they gained control of these ancient artifacts. Now, really, if you think about it, what could be more powerful to have control of on Earth than ancient alien technology? And if you don't mind, can I just read Ezekiel's so Ezekiel saw the craft leaving the temple, and I think I gave you that. Do you have that illustration with the gold craft? And then it's got the got the Bible scripture there where he describes it. And then Ezekiel had a vision.
I can get it.
Okay.
Just keep going.
Yep. And then Ezekiel had a vision later that because he saw God, which is an extraterrestrial or an interdimension, is not of this earth, is an entity, is a corporeal entity not of this earth. And so I'll just read you the scripture. It says, "The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, 'Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever.'" So we're not talking about some spirit, some non-corporeal spirit that just sort of hangs around. We're talking about a corporeal, physical entity of some sort who literally has feet and says this is where their feet will be with the Israelites forever. And so that was a future vision. But if anybody can read the description of Ezekiel's wheel. So Ezekiel saw the entity in the temple leave, and he described the craft that that the entity was in. And I think lots of people have seen descriptions. He talks about wheels within wheels, but I found the perfect artist's rendition of it. And really, he's describing a saucer-shaped craft that is turning within itself. It's like a top, if you can picture a top that, turns in the middle. That's what he's describing. And he says it has eyes all around the rim. Those are most likely portholes. All right, so I think those are previous renditions, but I texted you one last night.
Yeah, I can't.
Oh,
I can't find it.
Well, it's pretty. Let me see. It's really important. It's a gold disc.
I mean, I'm assuming it would look like something like this with the eyes all around it.
No, that's very different. You know what? I think I'm gonna text it to you again because it's pretty. It's got the scripture on there and everything. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna see if I can text it to you again.
But Ezekiel, Burchett has been on the show several times talking about Ezekiel and the wheel and the wheel within the wheel, right? And how, basically, if you basically take that story and you look through it, look through a different lens, look at it through a lens of current times. The highest technologically and capable invention at the time was the wheel. So he describes it with their highest advancement in technology, right? Same thing that we do now. We call them extraterrestrials. They're in spaceships because we have spaceships and we're flying to the moon, right? So, it's changed from, Jacques Vallée's talked about this, how it's changed. The name's just simply changed from fairies to gods to the forces of nature and elements and incarnate to now extraterrestrials. So I think it's fair to say that if they are now, we've talked about this plenty of times, and I think it's safe to say that there is some sort of back door where people are discussing if this is happening out in the open in Jerusalem, right? Again, what are the other governing bodies clued in on? And is that the reason that the UFO files and transparency, Rogan talks about it all the time. Why now? Why now? Why everybody's asking why now? Why now? Well, could it be because we know something's coming and we have to get everybody buckled up and braced for impact?
Yes. And I think I've read statistics that we are at the lowest church attendance ever in the history of churches. Most are not educated at all in scripture. So if something like extraterrestrials show up and they're ancient aliens, people are not
would be
on. Did you get the picture that I just texted to you? Because that's really the one that just drives it home.
All right. I'll pull it up, but it's gonna take me a minute.
But so the whole point is that all of this is going towards the end times. And that means different things for different religions. It's really hard to summarize what that means for one religion because it's different for so many. But basically, it's the return. It's the return of this of this other entity. And, so who are these entities? And are they going to come back really angry? Because Old Testament God was really angry. And, sorry. And, some of the Christian faiths will say, well, the rapture will come first. And, well, is rapture just another word for abduction? Is that what we would call it now? And I think it's an exciting time because religion and science are finally coming together. Like religion does not seem whole by itself because it doesn't make a lot of sense when you're talking about when you're talking about these beings and these creatures and you don't what is this? And science isn't complete either. But when you bring them both together, it really is, it really gives a whole picture, I think. And I think they are preparing us, like you said, I think it's possible they're coming back, and obviously the Jewish faith, they think that they're coming back. They're going to so much trouble to.
And it's not even just the Jewish faith. Some Catholics believe this too, that with the building of the third temple, it will prompt the return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, Yahweh.
And it brings yes. So for the Christians, it means, and for different sects of Christianity, it means different things. So. For some of the Christians, they believe that this will mark the return of Jesus and the rapture and the tribulation and the time.
When you say the rapture, I want you to be clear. What is the rapture?
Basically, the rapture is another word for being abducted. The rapture is when God or Jesus comes back and he takes up all of his followers, and I've seen movies where people have had it depicted, where they're literally sitting in their car on the highway and then poof, they're just gone. But Jesus will take everybody back up with him into heaven while everything goes down on earth. And people will be brought back to life. That is the rapture. Really, it's another word for abduction. Yes, there it is. That's the visual that I think everybody needs. And can you see it well enough to read it? Because that is I think that really nails.
I'll read it.
Okay.
They were identical wheels. Let me get full screen here. Sorry. They were identical wheels, sparkling like diamonds in the sun. It looked like they were wheels within wheels, like a gyroscope. 17-21. They went in any one of the 4 directions they faced, but straight, not veering off. The rims were immense, circled with eyes. When the living creatures went, the wheels went. When the living creatures lifted off, the wheels lifted off. So it kind of sounds like what he's describing is that when when he says that so they went in any one of the 4 directions they faced, so that's oscillation, right? But straight, and it was moving straight, not veering off. The rims were immense, circled with eyes, which you pointed out to be portholes, maybe. When the living creatures went, the wheels went. So that's where it kind of confuses me. Is he thinking this is a living creature? Is he
Well,
but he
yeah.
says wheels.
So he actually talks about that earlier. I think,
or was there someone in the craft?
There's a living person in the craft, and he says that it looks like a human, like it looks like a person with bronze skin. So I'm thinking that this is a person.
The Guardians of the Galaxy people.
I'm thinking they're in some kind of bronze suit, and they talk to him from this craft. So he recognizes that there is a person inside of this craft, and they give him prophecy of the future, and they talk to him about what's going on now. So he recognizes he's confused by, there's like a person in this. They didn't know, they didn't have the terminology for craft, and we've talked about that before, like where Mauro Biglino, who is the former Vatican Bible translator, he talks about how the word for spirit was mistranslated. He's saying that the original word for spirit, which was ruah or ruach, was mistranslated, and it should have been craft, but they didn't have
wild
craft.
That changes everything.
It changes everything. We no longer have a Holy Spirit. We have a holy craft, which
like a vessel.
Absolutely everything.
So, Winter Soldier says there's more than one Ark of the Covenant. What's your gauge on that? Could there be? And I know when we talk about the Ark of the Covenant, and you said that you potentially think it might be a craft. There are similarities that it was that when it was opened, the people that were exposed to it suffered similar things like radiation sickness, or what can only be described now, in comparison to radiation sickness. And we know that people like, Jim Peniston and the guys from Rendlesham, when they got close to the craft, Burroughs, had terrible reactions. Lots of people, Travis Walton may have even died by touching one of these craft, and then they revived him. That's why they took him. There's precedence for this. So do you think that there's a correlation between the radiation, and do you think it's just a byproduct?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I was just reading Schumer's UAP proposal that he had put together last night, and he was talking about the different departments, and one of them was the nuclear energy, Department of Nuclear Energy. And I thought, well, yeah, they're nuclear powered, and like you said, I do think the Ark of the Covenant is this craft. I don't think it's the giant mothership, which that's a whole nother thing. That's also that's in the Bible. That's called the New Jerusalem, and I can't wait to talk about that. That's even in Steven Spielberg's his movie, the Encounters of the Third of the what was his movie?
What's Encounters of the Third Kind?
Yeah, Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah. But the New
I
Jerusalem.
do have a clip that I wanted to play if you didn't mind. It's a 3-part clip. I had to break it up into 3s, but I think it could be a good so we're about 36 minutes in, and I have to pee, so it's going to be a good sequential thing. I've watched them 14 times, but I think it'd be really good for the audience to see. This is from the channel YouTube, Sticks and Stones video. So let's play that.
So we have the priest, we have the Red Heifer, we have the land, and we have everything ready. We just need to wait another 1.5 years.
That was filmed almost a year ago. There's quite a few updates going on surrounding the Third Temple right now in Israel. A few Bible verses and an explanation about the Third Temple and its importance in the coming days. Besides the abomination of desolation, a clear verse about the Third Temple, a straightforward verse is Revelation 11:1-2, which says, "Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood saying, 'Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar and those who worship there, but leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. Jesus confirms this in Luke 21:20-24, which says, "When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you'll know its desolation is near," confirming the same thing in Revelation 11. In verse 24 he says, "And it will fall by the edge of the sword, and will be led away captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled." Recently, that these red heifers could bring up to 1 million tourists to Israel. Biblical red heifer could bring 1 million visitors to Samaria. The discovery of an entirely red such heifer is a rarity. Jewish sources state that only 9 were slaughtered in the period from Moses to the destruction of the Second Temple by 70 CE. According to the 12th century sage Maimonides, the Messiah will offer the 10th red heifer. In keeping with biblical law, the heifer put on display in Shiloh is completely red and has never borne a yoke. Quote, "This is an exciting and exceptional event for the entire Jewish people. We are already in touch with researchers and promoters around the world who are waiting to come here with large groups. We have returned to the site of the tabernacle in Shiloh and are bringing back the Jewish past for the future of our people."
The book of Numbers explains that ashes of the red heifer are used to purify priests for their service in the temple. According to those working on the project, the ceremony of the red heifer needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have looked directly into where the temple stood. The land I'm standing on, bought 12 years ago, fits both of those standards. Rabbi Yitzhak Mamo heads Yuvnei Jerusalem, dedicated to the goal of rebuilding the Third Temple.
We can make here in this area the ceremony of the red heifer. That actually will be the first step to the temple. So we have the priest, we have the red heifer, we have the land, and we have everything ready. We just need to wait another 1.5 years.
Great tribulation in Matthew 24. In verse 3 it says, "As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, 'Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?'" The dedication for the Third Temple on the Mount of Olives, which plays a huge part in end times prophecy, could be right by the exact spot where Jesus gave one of the most prominent verses about end times prophecy. Really just validates that they're having these talks. They're very serious about getting this Third Temple built.
So, what will be? If there will be an earthquake, if there will be a war. But we have to prepare ourselves, prepared in the most short time that we have to make this operation. And therefore it's like an army operation. We have to calculate each second.
And probably one of the biggest recent signs besides the red heifers, which is massive, is this peace deal and these peace talks between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Payam. Another article from the Jewish press says Saudis seek to reboot Temple Mount status quo with peace deal, something we're seeing such as at the Abrahamic family house where all the Abrahamic religions, well there they have Muslim, Jewish, and Catholic, all coming together to join pretty much in a one world type of religion, something that will most likely take place in the Third Temple when the Antichrist declares to be God and everyone on earth who doesn't believe and follow Jesus worships and follows the beast. 2 Corinthians 6:16 says, "And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For you are the temple of the living God, as God has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people." This all comes to a head and will be Israel and the Jewish people's final sign when they realize that the false Messiah, the Antichrist, stands in this third temple and declares to be God. Temple. Revelation 21 verse 22, talking about New Jerusalem, says, "But I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple." We know that we are the temple of God, and we know that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. 5 prophetic reasons that we can know for absolutely certain that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, and these are just 5 out of 300 prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. Is 1, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, written first in Micah 5:2 and confirmed to us in John 7:42. The second, Jesus was born of a virgin, first prophesied in Isaiah 7:14, then told to us the fulfillment in Matthew 1:23. Number 3, Jesus was rejected by his people, which is why these things will be taking place in Jerusalem, once again, surrounding for their final sign to see the truth that Jesus is the Messiah. That was first prophesied in Psalm 118, 22 through 23, and then fulfilled in Matthew 21, 42 through 43. Number 4, Jesus suffered with and for sinners, first prophesied in Isaiah 53, and the fulfillment told to us in Matthew 20.
All right, yeah. So basically kind of goes over everything that we kind of discussed already, but gives it in a more bulked up or a little bit of a package. Now, he mentions one thing that kind of scares me, and that is that after he talks about the Antichrist. What do you have to say about the Antichrist, and would would now be the time where that person or individual shows themselves? And could this be another extraterrestrial being? Could it be what we talk about as the bad ETs? And what's your thoughts on a false idol?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about the Antichrist and we're talking about third temples, we're talking about being in the end days when there will be a return of somebody, and the Antichrist is a man. And it's very clear. I wish I had my Bible in front of me to read the description of the Antichrist. But the Antichrist is going to be he's going to be a person on earth that people will look to as a leader, that will have everybody fooled, that everybody's going to think is really here to help them and to offer peace. And really it's the opposite of that, and he is just out to for himself and to destroy everything. Now, I can currently think of a couple people on the world stage that fit that
But do
profile.
they really fit that?
I think. Well, I wish we had the scripture in front of us to look up, and we could just read it. But I think so, and I've heard other people talk about that too. I've heard.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I feel like they've talked about people like, when they were live. A lot of like when you go back and watch certain documentaries about it, they always talk about Bin Laden and Saddam, or Hitler, and these antichrists. Could there be multiple? Could there be multiple incarnations of evil? That, I mean, I don't know if I would go as far to say as like, does Vladimir Putin qualify?
Well, I mean, that's probably a matter of opinion, right? Like,
Right.
I don't, I think, the scripture really seems to say that the Antichrist is going to be very clear that this is going to be a person who comes under a guise of peace and just destroys everybody and everything. And then Jesus will come back and come on the scene. So we're literally talking about the return of these non-earthly, otherworldly beings. There's no other word for that but extraterrestrial or interdimensional. And then talking about being in the end days, then we're getting into Revelations, and they literally describe in Revelations the mothership. It's called the New Jerusalem. And he describes it very, very clearly. He describes it as a cube, and it's huge. It's not spherical at all. It's a giant square, and he says very clearly the New Jerusalem is the same length on all sides, and there's a north and an east and a south and a west entrance, and it's basically a city that descends from the sky. Now that's a model of the temple there.
Yeah, this is all I have on that.
But I wish I should have. I have a clip of it. So Spielberg actually put it in his movie, and I just realized it last night that in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg actually put the New Jerusalem at the end of the movie, and it was the giant mothership, and it looked like a city that descended from the sky. And you could very clearly, Steven Spielberg's rendition of it, you could very clearly see, like skyscrapers and buildings, and it looks like a city. And the Bible describes it very clearly with all of these colors, and that's what it is. It's a craft that descends from the sky, and it has a name, the New Jerusalem. So I mean, they're telling you that non-earthly beings are coming back. Some people will be saved and some won't be. That they may rule on earth for 1,000 years of wonder and perfect peace. They may take some people. Depends on what religion you subscribe to. And then it's really interesting when you think about time travelers, because like somebody like Jack Sarfati, Dr. Sarfati has been saying that these are time travelers for years, for decades. And the more I think about that, the more I think that there's a good chance that that's the case. And then are we literally talking about time travelers being documented in the ancient holy texts? And that's how they're so accurate. And then last night I was thinking about, well, it does say in the Bible that for Jesus, one day for Jesus is 1,000 years for us. Well, how does that make sense? That makes sense with relativity, right? If you think about relativity and space travel, somebody or interdimensional travel, somebody who's traveling really fast in space, time is going to pass so much differently for them. So it might feel like one day for them, but for us, it could be 1,000 years. And, so yeah, so if somebody like Jesus really was resurrected, really did leave the earth, really did go back to space, to his father in space, um, and he said his father, there were other rooms in his father's house. Um, yeah, so that's the end. So I just realized also last night that Steven Spielberg put a clip of a Catholic priest at the end of Close Encounters. And you know, where they're getting ready to do the trade-off right here with the people who go. There's a Catholic priest there who says, these are God's angels. God's angels are going to take you. We wish you the best. And pilgrims. Twice, this priest calls the aliens God's angels. And this is Steven Spielberg's movie. And that's from 1977. I never caught that part until last night. And there's the New Jerusalem. Yeah. So this ending scene, it really shows. And then when you go and you read the description of the New Jerusalem,
It's a city of it's a floating city.
It's a floating city. Exactly. And I think Spielberg did a marvelous job of depicting that. I mean, what
This
difficult.
is like a documentary.
Yeah. I mean, and that was 1977. I mean, that was before I was even born. And people are still uncomfortable with these ideas or not familiar with them. And they've been out there for so long. It's been in front of everybody's faces for so long, and it still isn't sinking in. But it feels like it's picking up, and it needs to sink in, because literally, if they're about to sacrifice these red heifers, we're going into the end times, and these other beings are coming back.
So when we talk about the end of times, are we meaning that literally, or could that be a vague statement? Because the end of time, right? Now let's break this down. The end of time, it's impossible, right? The end of time, unless you destroyed somehow the whole entire universe. So I think the proper word is the apocalypse of Earth, right? And if we look at that, does that mean the apocalypse of the Earth and the way that we see ourselves, and is it a metaphorical explosion, right? Instead of, I know this sounds crazy, but instead of the world actually ending, it's just the world as we know it, because we become part of something larger, and it's finally confirmed. And now we're not fighting each other, and it's also what I would call like a singularity, the end of time, right? Man-made time. It could, I mean, I sound stupid, but
right.
I might just sound like an idiot.
No, you're entirely right. It's more the end of an era. And really, we're leaving the age of Pisces, and we're going into the age of Aquarius. And I think that's really what it should be. It shouldn't be like the end of all time. What is Kent saying? The end of time
The
can
end
be
of time can be measuring
no
time is
longer
no longer relevant. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, it's the end of a time. And it's interesting because this period of time right now it coincides with a period of time Jesus, the Hindu people with the Kali Yuga, because they also have. I'm trying to remember. Maybe somebody watching remembers better than I do. But one of the religions from the East, it has time divided up into all. Time is the timeline's divided up into these various sections, and we're leaving one time period and we're going into another time period of great. And when we have these transitions, there's great change. There's great periods of upheaval. And the Christians would say that, and I think the Jewish people too. I think they would say that there will be ushering in a period of great peace and prosperity on earth. But it's a little bit it's going to be a little uncomfortable and ugly getting to that point. And does that match up with what we're seeing in the world? Well, kinda. I mean, our scientists are saying that we're having a climate change disaster. The world does seem to be on a precipice in multiple places, in multiple ways. We've got wars breaking out all over the place. So does that kind of match up? It does. What we see going on in the world kind of does match up. But our grandparents wondered this too. Was it the end of times? Was it because just creating the state of Israel was supposed to usher in the end times and bring Jesus back, and that was a whole generation ago now. That was in the 40s. That was in 1947. So it's not just overnight, but it does seem like things are wrong.
Look at this chart. So this is since the creation of the state of Israel was declared, and then that Gaza belongs to Egypt. That was 1948, and in 1967 they have the 6-Day War. Israel captures Gaza. 1982 Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel. 87 the first Intifada. 93 the Oslo Accords. 2000 second Intifada. 2000 to present. I mean, it just seems like that they've just been fighting for their survival since their inception, with things like the partition. And I know that's from the opposite side, when they split the Gaza, when Gaza was taken off. But it just seems like it's a place where so much bad has happened, and it's hard for me to imagine that this is the holiest of places when such atrocities have happened. And I'm not saying Israel's committed them. I'm saying it's hard. It's hard to come to grips with that this piece of the world where it seemed to be under siege for ever is going to play the biggest part in our history.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've thought a lot about that too, because it does seem like those two things.
It's the smallest. Look at that little small area.
The most historic, valuable real estate in the entire world has been nothing but war, constant war, and it really hasn't had much peace ever. And maybe that's why they don't come back. Maybe we can't get it together enough, and they don't want to be here. It's not safe for them to be here. And think about, but it does sort of make sense because we're still kind of petty. We still, if we could get over our divisions, and saying my way is the only right way and your way is wrong. And if we could try to see a little bit of everybody's perspective, and I think that's kind of what, like ancient alien theory does. Nobody's wrong in this. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And when we take all of the pieces of the puzzle and we put them together, we see the whole picture. But people are still so they have such knee-jerk reactions against doing that, even though it's been out. This idea has been out since, geez, I mean, at least the 50s, the 60s, if not before that. So it's just interesting. Change does not happen quickly.
No, it does not. And it will never. It will never. And so, all right. Hypothetical here. All this stuff happens, right? The heifer is cremated. It's used to bless and coat the tools, the land. It's purifying it. They built the temple, and the Messiah returns, right? When confronted, if when that happens, would the world consider that first contact, and what would that look like? Because I think a lot of people think it would look like this. No, like this. But in reality, it would look like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think first contact happened a long time ago. I think they were our creators. I think,
Again,
yeah.
This is what people think.
Right.
So this is imagination, and this is most likely reality. So are we ready for that?
Yeah. Well, we've been I mean, there have been times where we've been living beside them, and that was the purpose of this temple before, was we were living beside them in the same cities, in ancient Egypt, and that's a cool one. So first contact happened a long time ago. That's ancient history. It would be, it would really be what they say. It would be the return, and I don't know how. I think they are trying to prepare people. I think that's not really the job of DoD to do that, though. And but I do see people on the forefront trying to do that. Like I mentioned, there's Mauro Biglino, who was a former Vatican Bible translator, and he's retranslating the Bible into modern terms where it makes so much more sense now. Like Holy Spirit is holy craft. Well, suddenly that makes a lot more sense. And then there's Paul Wallace. He's Australian, and he was a preacher for 30 years, and he talks a lot. He's got 3 or 4 books out, and he talks about the sky people, and how the sky people are ubiquitous. They're in every religion from every place around the world. And so I do see people out there who are putting the truth out and trying to get social change and acceptance to happen. But I'm not sure how much people are paying attention, and I'm not sure how much they're going to pay attention until it affects their life personally. And until there is that craft hanging in the sky. And there are people who actually question, well, even if they do, declare a holy war, basically by sacrificing these heifers and then attempting to build a temple where there's a Muslim mosque, that's going to set off a major war. Would any entities even want to go there after that? After that much bloodshed and that much fighting and setting off a global war for that, maybe they wouldn't even want to go there after that. Maybe it wouldn't feel safe. I personally think they would go to another part of the world. And I think it's just really cool when you look at when you re-look at these temples as they historically they've really been like places, they've been like almost they've been like ambassadors. These have been like embassies. These have been like extraterrestrial, interdimensional, other entity embassies. But they didn't have embassy. They had, temple. But they're kind of serving the same function. And then the Raelians, we talked about them before. And there's a documentary out on Netflix. Did you ever get to watch that documentary about the?
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Was not what I was expecting either. We do have a couple questions. So Jess asks, so how do we go from here and stay positive instead of filled with existential dread? She is Jewish, by the way.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. I mean, I guess it really depends on what your beliefs are, what you subscribe to, and what gives your life meaning. None of us are going to have much impact in the bigger picture, alone. So I think it's important to do the things that make you happy. And there are a lot of, I mean, the Christians that see it as a good thing. They think they're going to be raptured up and taken away. There's nothing I would love more right now than to be abducted by aliens and taken away. As long as I'm not being abducted for food or to another slave planet. Yeah, I'd be willing to go. Just like in Spielberg's movie, he showed the what did he call them there? He called them pilgrims. I think
yes.
I think it offers a lot of possibility of hope. And I think it's really exciting, where even without the aliens or, any other otherworldly beings coming back, where our technology is getting to the point where we are going to be on other planets. And that's pretty dang exciting. As far as our accepted history goes, we haven't done that. And, I think that there's a lot of, technological change. We are in the middle of a space revolution, and that's going to change everything from energy to the economy to where and how we mine, all of that. So I think the idea of going to space is very exciting, whether we go with Elon Musk or Bezos or the aliens, I don't know, but I think that would be really cool to do that.
And if you think NASA, so if something's going down, and if you don't think NASA, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, if you don't think all of them are clued in on this, you guys have to remember that when the space program first began, the satellites would eject the film cartridges. Remember these kind of film?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They would eject those. Pilots would come and basically grab them with these makeshift antennas on the front of the thing. This is the company that made these, right? Kodak. They would ship the reels of pictures from the satellites that we were taking of the moon and the first shots. They were sending them to Kodak to be developed, right? So again, the military industrial complex, they've got to be clued in to some degree. And is the Schumer amendment, are all these things ways to to bring the American people up to speed? And are other people kind of trying to block it because, like I said, Lockheed and Northrop, they have a lot of money to be gained, even if the Messiah is returning. Because the day the Messiah returns, the next day, your cable bill is going to be due.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I don't know if we'll still have TV, but I think that it's really, I do think
Apple, Amazon, they're all in on it.
Of course the government knows, absolutely they know. I think that's a big part of what Grush's testimony was trying to do, was he was trying to, sort of slowly sensitize people to the idea that there are interdimensionals, which is, a fascinating, he's not even using the word extraterrestrial, an interdimensional, which would make total sense. If you're traveling long distances, you would most likely travel through dimensions instead of use space. But that testimony happened in Congress. And then when you look at, a lot of the experiencers, their experiences that they come back with, when you look at a lot of these people who've had contact, and one of the biggest themes that they have from their experiences are visuals of Armageddon, end of the world type stuff. And that's been happening for decades. And I've heard people say, well, they're just doing that to be cruel. They're just doing that to measure your people's reactions. But is it possible they are actually showing them something and they're trying to warn us or get us ready? Eric, UFOs, cover-ups, and conspiracy. With your war between Israel and Palestine waging.
With war between Israel and Palestine waging, when the war ends, they say we enter the 7 years of peace. Will end, Antichrist will return, and how do you think that will happen?
Yeah, so
the 7 years of peace.
Right. Yeah, that's one belief, that could be possible. I mean, I think the only way for this to really happen is for everybody to come to an agreement that, your religion has as much legitimacy as mine, and we're all seeing facets of the same gem.
Yes, we all need to step back. Because I think we all need to step back. All the religions of the world need to step back and realize just how similar they all are, right? Instead of fighting these holy wars, hey Logan, instead of fighting these holy wars and battling over land, I mean, it's ridiculous. We need to step away from it all. And we need to look in and say, it looks like we all have a piece of the puzzle, right? Whether it's Quetzalcoatl in South America or, what is it, Thoth in Sumerian, or Noah, or any of these, they all tell such grimly similar stories. It's just, it blows my mind that they can't step back and be like, oh, your book is kind of like mine. There's only a couple differences, maybe if we came together and we compared notes, we could advance.
Right. Well, and maybe they would want to come back if we could get over our differences and do that, because there's been there's a comic I've seen going around where the aliens land and Jesus is on the cross, and he's being crucified, and the alien's talking to the other alien, and he says, yeah, I think we should get out of here, Bob. And like, why do they want to be here? If we're doing that to each other, what are we going to do to them? And so I think we have to demonstrate a level of maturity for them to even want to come back. So even if if they do build the temple, I mean, I'm not Jewish, I don't know, maybe somebody knows, how do they know for sure that this otherworldly entity will go to that temple?
Yeah, what if they come above the pyramids or Stonehenge or the Grand Canyon or several other places, or Devil's Tower, any of the million other places that have been theorized?
Yeah, and so
And
the
what
Bible
and curveball, what if it's the Anunnaki?
Yeah, I
What
mean,
if it's these 12 feet tall, 12-foot tall, you know, versions of us that are step out of crafts and, just are like, it's like, hey, we're back. We told you we'd come. We're here.
Yeah,
What
and I
what a
think there
curveball that would be.
I think there have been multiple races who have visited us. Because the Old Testament talks about Yahweh, um, but I don't think Yahweh was the God of Jesus. Jesus never once meant, and Yahweh, with Old Testament God, was pretty pissed off. He was very vengeful. He was wiping out cities. He was nuking people. He even he even was kind of spiteful. When the Jews were wandering in the desert and they asked for water, he gave them serpents instead.
Mhm.
Just for asking for water. Like, whoa, like, is this Yahweh character such a good person? I don't know. And demanded all of these sacrifices. Um, you know, is that is that really?
It doesn't sound divine.
Yeah, that's a very different character than what Jesus seemed to be talking about. And Jesus never said, never used the word Yahweh. Jesus always said, "My Father in heaven," and the character that he was describing was very different than the Yahweh character. And so I think that we have, well, and even at the very beginning of the Bible, right there, right there in Genesis, it says the gods were walking in the garden. So we already know there's more than one. And then if you look at, multiple religions from around the world, they do describe different entities, and from different places. The Bushmen of South Africa, they have a praying mantis god, and I believe his name is Kagan, and he comes from the dog star, the Sirius star. So I think we have been visited by multiple entities, and they've turned into cargo cults. It is what we
Yep.
would learn from World War II.
Yeah.
And Eric
Yeah.
says, were
Absolutely.
Anunnaki described as bad aliens? They created slave races.
Well, they created.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't. So they created a race because they thought they were being treated unfairly. What they wanted was women, and and like another set of hands that they right. So they genetically manipulated or came up with us, and that's why we have an obsession with gold or to such degree. I don't know if that's like us creating AI, is that evil just because we did it
Well,
for
yeah.
our own benefit?
That's a very good example, Ty. And I think that we are at a unique point in our history right now to be able to understand the position that they were in, because we are making a creation now, and I just saw yesterday, I believe it's the Chinese, they have these robots that are ready to go in every house, and I'm sure everybody saw that movie. I can't remember what it was called, but, sentient robots rebel is basically the whole idea of the movie. And
iRobot?
no, it was about a little kid. There was a kid robot, and it was
Not Smart House, right?
it was just this past year it came out. And anyways, the robots had learned to reproduce, is what it was. I ended up turning it off.
A von Neumann probe, right? Self-replicating.
Oh yeah, I've never heard that before, but that was basically the premise of the movie. But so then does that make us evil for creating AI
for our
to make our lives easier? Are we creating a slave race? We don't see them as sentient beings, but I'm sure that that's not far off. I mean, there was one guy at Google who claimed that AI
Lambda was sentient.
Yep. Yeah. So there are a lot of moral and ethical questions, and we might when we start dealing with cultures from otherworldly cultures, their values are most likely going to be very different than ours. So judging other cultures through our lenses, that's going to be a big shock in every way. It's going to be a big culture shock. So yeah, I mean, we're the Anunnaki good. I mean, because then you could argue, well, we wouldn't have been created at all then if we weren't created to do the gold mining work for them that they didn't want to do on their own. So it's good and bad are matters of perspective. I think
Yin and yang. Yeah, we've talked about this many times. There's got to be a yin and yang, a light and a dark. That's why I think in the beginning, before whatever, there was this balance. There's always been this balance, and maybe this balance was interrupted and is what caused the Big Bang. I could be way off again, right? No one truly knows, but something happened where one side basically beat out the other because the universe was created, and it's essentially nothing but light, right? So light and darkness, I think, is something that we'll always ponder. I think it's in our nature. But this was a really good time, and we'll have to pick it up again next week. Unfortunately, I have a big day, long day ahead of me tomorrow. I'm gonna be up at 4 a.m. So that's my normal day, but I also have an event tomorrow night, so it's a double. Thank you so much for coming and doing this deep dive. We'll be back next week. Maybe we'll go back to Thursday. I don't know. I'm kind of like in the Tuesday feel, but we'll see. We have only like 20, 25 people watch on YouTube, but 120 on Twitter. Makes no sense. I hate these algorithmic differences, because then the audio will do like a quick 35,000. It's just like YouTube hates us for some reason. So I don't know. You know what it is, everybody. Teresa, where can they find you? I did put your Twitter handle at Tyndall Review there on the screen. But if they want to continue the conversation, where can they go?
Yeah, so Twitter is Tyndall Review, and then also Instagram and Facebook are Tyndall Review. And then also if they want to reach me by email, it's Tyndall, TINDAL review@gmail.com.
All right. And I had a great time. So Jerusalem preparing for the return. And is that Messiah extraterrestrial? I guess only time will tell, guys. But I and Teresa are along for that ride. And we want to thank today's video sponsor, Adentia Herbals, and all of the members of the show. Thank you, guys. You know what it is. Like, share, subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, any podcast platform, leave a written review and a star rating. It truly helps us get to bigger and better audiences so we can come at you with bigger and better content. Introducing the ultimate cognitive enhancement solution, BioMind. Today's video is exclusively brought to you by our sponsor, Adentia Herbals. Unlock your brain's full potential with a powerful blend of 9 meticulously selected plants and mushrooms, each backed by peer-reviewed research for their cognitive boosting benefits and safety. Adentia Herbals formula combined organic full-spectrum powders and potent standardized extracts, ensuring that you receive the optimal concentration of each ingredient's cognitive enhancing compound, carefully selecting the most desirable parts of each plant and mushroom to create a harmonious blend that supports your mental clarity and focus. But that's not all. They infuse each bottle with personal intention of improving the lives, the minds, and overall greatness of each of their customers. Because of their commitment to your well-being every step of the way, you're going to get an exclusive 25% off your order via www.adentiaherbals.com using our code TOTALDisclosure at checkout. All the links will be in the description or on the screen.